In this video lesson, I'm going to introduce you to the bass drum. A concert bass drum in the percussion section is a very important instrument, and we're going to learn how to play it with some very basic techniques in this first video, and we're going to play it along with Lightly Row on lesson number 5 in A Fresh Approach for the Beginning Percussionist, book number 1. All right, so the bass drum, we all know, we have seen bass drums before, but what you may not know is there are different types of bass drums for different types of music. A concert bass drum is generally very large, 36 inches or more, and has 2 heads on it and has a very low rumbly sound. A bass drum on the drum set is going to be smaller, anywhere from 18 to 26 inches, and it's going to have more of a muffled sound or a dampened sound that has the kind of sounds that are appropriate for whatever type of music, whether it's rock that has a really big impact on the bass drum, or jazz, which has more of an open sound. And then, of course, we have marching bass drums, which you will see on the marching field. In a lot of cases, there will be 4 or 5 or even 6 marching bass drums. They will be muffled slightly so we can hear the articulation, and those parts will be all split up. But for a concert bass drum, you're going to see that we have 2 heads on this. We are putting this bass drum on a stand. The stand is a tilting stand, so I can loosen the nuts or the bolts on this. I can have the bass drum straight up and down this way, or what we really like to do is be able to tilt the drum and be able to play it on one surface. So we have a higher pitched head and a lower pitched head. The lower pitched head is the resonance head, and this is the batter head. The batter head is the one that we play on. So in general, if you have a bass drum and it's tuned well, you'll hear one pitch, which is not really a pitch, but a tone, and then a lower tone on the bottom. So we really want that kind of two-tone because the resonance head will really make the drum vibrate. Now, let's talk about where to strike the bass drum. So in general, a bass drum head is very much like the snare drum or any of the other percussion instruments. It has a node, the place where the air or the vibrations really collide with each other. So as I'm striking the drum, the vibrations spread around the drum head and they come back and forth. The air moves through the column and enacts the resonant head. So if I play right in the center, the vibrations go straight out and straight back and they collide with each other. So the node, like the string place on the marimba that we're not supposed to play on, will really make that sound dead and thuddy. So the best place to play the bass drum is just like the snare drum, is to play it a little off center. So obviously you get a much more resonant sound, much more vibrations that are natural to the drum itself. Now let's talk about the mallet for a second that you're going to play with. In general, bass drum mallets can be made from a wide variety of materials, all kinds of different types of felt or cord or different chamois or different coverings, just to make different kinds of sounds for different types of music that we play. Also, bass drum mallets can come in very large heads and very small heads. We do not want to play with timpani mallets on the bass drum. We want to play with a real bass drum mallet. Now, this is very much like a timpani mallet. I have a shaft that's made out of maple, so it's got a nice light feel to it, a very heavy top, so it has a lot of weight to the top, and then it's covered with a soft felt. Now, one thing that you have to know is, unless you own your own bass drum mallets, we don't ever want to grab the bass drum mallets with our hands, because the felt will either get dirty from the grease and the oil from your hands. Even if you have a clean hands, you're still going to have some oil on it. And then not only that, but the felt will start wearing away over time. Certainly, if you have a little bit of pile that's collecting a little bit of string, you don't want to pull that felt because it will just unravel, just like a sweater. So try to keep your hands off of the bass drum mallets, especially the heads, not the mallets. You gotta hold the mallet. But the head of the bass drum mallet, try to keep your hands away from touching the felt if you can, all right? Usually a felt mallet will have a seam where you sometimes we'll draw a little line on the seam to not play on the seam. We want to play on the fleshy part of the felt. All right? So with a bass drum mallet, we want to think of our piston stroke the same way we think of with a marimba. So we start up, we go back up. But with a bass drum, similar to a lot of other percussion instruments, we want to think of an elastic stroke. So we want to hit the drum and we want to think of pulling the sound out. So if I thought about a rubber band attaching itself to the drum, I want to think of pulling that rubber band. I want to pull the sound out. So if I'm just striking the drum a little off center, a bass drum in general is going to have a very weighty sound, so I want to use the weight of my forearm to hit the drum, making sure I'm not hitting with my fingers. And then to get that big sound, as big a sound as possible. Okay? Slight rattle in this drum, but we want to make sure that your drum is not rattling while you're playing. All right, so that's the stroke that we're going to use. All right, bass drum parts in general will not ring too much, all right, unless we have a whole note or a big long note. We want to somewhat muffle the drum. We want to somewhat have control over how long that resonant sound happens. So in a lot of cases, we'll use a towel to muffle the drum. So that way it just cuts off a little bit of that vibration sound. Now I can use my hand to muffle the drum. Experiment with where I place my hand to make the best sound possible. I like having a little bit of towel on the drum just because it spreads out the sound just a little bit more. It gives me a little bit darker tone quality. So sometimes I like to just put my hand on the towel. Now that has a really nice warm sound. I can still hear the articulation. If you have a bass drum that's on just a cradle, a T-stand, you might have to put your knee on the bass drum, which you can just lift your knee up. Sometimes in marches, the conductor wants that really dry bass drum sound, in which case I can put my foot on a stool, I can put it on the bottom of a snare drum stand, and then to get the driest sound possible, I take this hand and I reach around on this side, so I'm muffling both heads. All right, a lot of different options in how you choose to muffle the drum. I'm going to choose to keep it at a slight angle, and then I'm going to use a little bit of towel here to keep a really nice dry sound. Now, in the part on lesson number 5, on lightly row, I'll show you the first line of the music. Notice that the snare drum part is written on top, bass drum part on the bottom. Now, on this part, I have written quarter notes and half notes. So I can, if I choose to, have a longer sustain on the half note. In which case, what I'm doing here is grabbing the towel, I'm pushing the towel against the head for my short quarter notes. And then whenever I have a half note, I can lift up the towel, let that note ring. I can also do that with my hand. It all depends on the sound that you want. What you do not want to do is use too much towel, and you certainly don't want to play on the towel. That sounds great if you're playing kind of a rock drum piece where the bass drum is mimicking a drum set, which we'll actually talk about a little bit later. But for this line, what I'm doing is draping the towel over here. You can use a little clip to make sure it doesn't fall off, but I'm grabbing the towel, I'm lifting up for the half notes. So here's the first line of this. No big deal. Quarter notes, half notes, and quarter rests. 1, 2, ready, go. All right, so no big thing. I don't have to teach you the rhythms or anything like that. You could probably read it down. Sometimes it's just getting used to reading notes that are upside down on the same part as a snare drum part. All right, look at the second line. In the first measure, I have half, rest, rest, and then a quarter note, and then a whole note. Now this is a place where I definitely want the bass drum to vibrate. So 2, 3, 4, 1, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. All right. I could make each one of those quarter notes, but I don't think that's necessary. I think just having quarter notes that have a resonant tone to them, and then any longer notes having that, lifting that up and letting that vibrate. All right, so here is the second line. You can pretend and play along with me. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2. All right, maybe a little too much. And then my last line. All right, still just reading quarter notes and half notes. If you'll just get used to thinking of lifting on the half notes, you'll get that really big, longer tone for half notes. 1, 2, ready, go. 2, 3, 2, half rest, half note, 1. All right, so practice your bass drum. See if you can get used to lifting and closing the sound of your rest. Or you can just play the rhythms with the towel all the way here. It just depends on what your band director really wants you to do and the sound that you're looking for when you're playing lightly row with the rest of the ensemble. Okay, as always, use your ears, listen to the sound of the other instruments, making sure that you're blending so that you're playing exactly in the same volume level as all of the other instruments. Bass drum is a very big instrument, and you can easily overplay the bass drum, play it too loud. Okay, I can make huge sounds on this that would annoy everybody, but I want to blend within the ensemble. So first step, go to PadLab, work out the bass drum part with the snare drum part, and then have fun playing this with your ensemble. I'll see you in the next video lesson.